welcome to Bridging of Ages. My name is Dan Mendelevitz. Today we're going to talk about how I'll contribute. And I'll be having a special guest today, and we'll talk about him a little bit. And so we want to know about how everyone can contribute to your team. And we talk a lot about intergenerational teams on our show here. And it's important that you think about how each person in that group can do their contribution. What really drives that innovation? And things are changing very rapidly. So it's important that we understand how they can contribute, how they can collaborate. We want to really recognize those unique value that every person in your innovative process will bring to the table. And resilience is really a big part of how we all contribute. And frequently, we don't include or we discount the contributions of those who are overcoming tough situations where it's outside of work or within work or things that they've overcome in order before they come to you. And it's important for us to understand that that kind of resilience is actually an asset to your organization. And even though those people may be temporarily in another situation, the resilience as they come back from that will be a strength that you can use. So I have a special guest today. His name is Miark Light. And he knows a lot about resilience. And we're looking forward to our conversation. Now, Miark Light was a guy who barely graduated from high school, was a quitter in school sports, a college dropout. He was a struggling, failed salesperson. And he had a transformation. He transformed into becoming one of the top producers in sales. He's now a sales trainer, cross-country cyclist, published author, and a philanthropist, and has shown just an incredible amount of resilience. Miark is a survivor of many diseases, which could have and should have killed him, according to him, and even including stage 4 cancer. And he now speaks and consults and coaches people from all different walks of life on how to transform their life. And Miark teaches these skills he's developed on resilience, confidence, mental toughness that he's developed on his journey. And something that we're going to talk to today is how that resilience can help all of your organizations. Think about those people who you may be discounting or not bringing into your organization who have this incredible resilience that they have overcome such adversity. And there's really nothing in your organization that is tougher than what they've gone through. So we're going to have an opportunity to explore that today with Miark. And I'm really looking forward to our discussion. So after a word from our sponsor, we'll be right back with a discussion with Miark Light. Welcome back. You just joined us. Welcome to Bridget of Ages and my guest, Mark Light. Welcome, Mark.
Good to be with you, Dan.
Good. Thank you. I just wanted to have a little opportunity as we started to talk about resilience is really important on how everybody's going to be contributing now and in the future. And I just wanted to get a little, if you don't mind, a little bit about, how you got to this point and how you were able to, and we'll talk a bit about how you were able to bring that resilience and how you're able to bring that to other people.
Yeah, well, it's certainly not something I was born with. It is a skill. I think a critical life skill that has served me pretty well, particularly these last 20 to 25 years, where I've needed
Hmm.
quite a bit. But like I said, it certainly is not something that I was born with. I sort of unknowingly developed it in the last couple of decades of my life. And it was only upon sort of self-reflection as I was going through late stage cancer and I realized I was handling it mentally better than what a lot of people do. And I started sort of taking inventory and realizing, okay, what are the things in my life? What are the skills that helped me to become more mentally tough, better able to deal with some major life setbacks?
That's great. Yeah, I've had some of those setbacks myself, and I understand. And it's amazing the resilience of the human spirit if we put our mind to it. I had my own incident where I, got taken away by the paramedics and found myself on a journey that I wasn't expecting. So I
Yeah, that
fully
can be a little
understand where
scary
you're at.
and wild. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's very scary. And I'm curious how. So you were able to overcome a lot, and you were able to develop this incredible resilience and confidence. And as you says in your bio, you started from a very different place, and perhaps because of the some of the tough things you had to go through, that probably helped you learn this resilience. And I certainly can understand that. That's happened in my own journey. Uh, so how can you take a person and actually teach them that and help guide them towards it? Because as a guide, as a consultant, as a coach, um, you're in a very unique position to help somebody find those things within themselves. And I'm just curious on some of the ideas that you're able to put forward and help somebody become able to contribute.
Yeah. So the first thing that I would say is I heard a quote a few years ago that I think sums up at least the beginning part of it. And the quote was that play the hand you've been dealt like it was the hand you wanted, and that hit home
I
with
like
me.
that. Yeah.
I think I did too. I think that the first thing that but before you even begin developing the skill of resilience, the first thing to lay the foundation is to separate ourselves from what so many of us have is a victimhood status. Victimhood comes in so many different forms and it's packaged in so many different ways. But there's a big difference, by the way, between being victimized by something, by some outside circumstances, or even victimized by some of our own choices, which certainly describes a lot of the adversity I've faced in my life. But backing away from that and empowering yourself to not be a victim. Victimhood has a sort of ascended to one of the great statuses in our culture, and it's like a drug because it's very comforting. Because look, when we are a victim of something, it's not our fault. The problem is out there, so it's the world's job to solve it and not our own. And that's the first thing, is to just take responsibility, take ownership of our circumstances. But before we even get to that part, is realize that no matter what life throws at us, see it, develop the ability to see it as neutral, neither good nor bad. It's just what life happens. I think one of the problems that we all face is we expect life to not be difficult. So it catches us off guard because life is always going to
Well,
be difficult.
life is a journey of being difficult, and as you probably have found, my travails and my mistakes, I've probably learned vastly more from than my successes. And
Yeah, adversity is probably the single greatest teacher that life gives us.
yeah, and I don't see how you can live without having adversity. And I remember when I went through my own difficulties of saying, starting off as woe is me and why is this happening to me? And, you know, and you're right, it's very easy to get into a victim mode and blame everybody else. And but I know in my own journey, I was able to find some just gold in the whole operation, the way people showed up for me and the nurses and aides who took care of me day to day and just gave me this beautiful care and there were some great people in the system. There's also some people who are a little difficult, but that's part of the adversity. And you as me, fought hard and were able to come out the other side. Um, but yeah, I can see that victimhood. I see it in organizations. I see it in people day to day, and it takes a lot of energy out of us. I can see. That's
It it
that.
it it really does, and the state of being in a victimhood status or
Mhm.
not taking responsibility usually leads to a whole myriad of emotions: fear, anger, which anger tends to be the front for a lot of other negative emotions that we don't want to show the
Good
world.
point. Yeah.
Or it's much more comforting to show the world anger than fear or hurt or sadness. But those emotions, which really can be channeled into something more positive, those emotions take so much energy out of you, and they take you out of a mindset where you could have the opportunity to solve problems and grow from these adversities. Dan, you made a really good point about as you look back on life, you tend to very clearly see the lessons from these adversities. But I think the
Mhm.
real trick is to be able to recognize them as they're happening. It's very easy to look back, and people should look back and see that how much they've learned from the difficulties, from the painful experiences, from the adverse situations. But being able to recognize that in the moment, I think that's the essence of the skill of resilience.
That's a very good point. It is hard while you're in the middle of that fight. I can see that. And is because I'm sure that some of the people that you are not just past that pain, but some of them are still steeped in that pain. And I know that, when I was in a lot of pain and the sickness from the medications and all those kind of things, it's hard to stay steady and say, what's the good point of this? And I'm curious how you can help people understand that piece.
So, setting aside or for the moment the victimhood thing that we already talked about here, one of the
Uh-huh.
things that I talk to people about, and I learned quite honestly by accident, is what I refer to as attitude aerobics. And that is the fact that even if you're in the middle of something very, very difficult, first of all, move your body, and I'm talking about in the context of being ill, which is only one form, obviously, of adversity here. But there, from a mindset point of view, attitude aerobics, in a nutshell, involves setting a daily habit of of doing one of three things or a combination of the three every single day, and that is express a gratitude to somebody about something specific, a random act of kindness, um, something of that nature, or find a genuine, actual, sincere compliment that you can pay somebody, ideally in writing, which is very easy now that we have text messages and stuff like that. Back in the day, it was like handwritten notes and stuff like that that we talked about. But putting yourself in a much better mindset through getting rid of the victimhood mindset that so many of us like to gravitate to because it's a habit, but also expressing gratitude, random acts of kindness, a genuine compliment. What that has a long-term effect on people is you by putting something good in the world, and it doesn't have to be much at all, but over time, what's going to happen is you're going to start thinking of yourself as a good person because you've been putting some good in the world. It sounds almost trite to say it, but then you start looking in the mirror, and on some psychological level, you're going to see a slightly different person, a better person than maybe you had before. And that's going to fundamentally change how you interact with the world in a very, very positive way. So those are some foundational things that anybody can do when they're in the middle of dealing with something very, very difficult.
I like that. I like the fact that it's really that pay it forward and giving. I see a lot of people getting only negative feedback, especially in the workplace. Just something, if you won't go to a restaurant, if you have to work with something difficult on a customer call or things like that, and they very rarely hear when they did a good job. I had the other day, I went to a restaurant with my wife, and this young man was serving, and he not only did a good job, he actually made you know, he made the experience more enjoyable. So I told him that. I said, I want you to know that he had a smile from ear to ear. And then I went over to his manager and told him the same thing. I said, I want your boss to know this too. Because at first, when you approach the boss, the guy's like, "Uh-oh, now I'm in trouble." I could see
No,
it on his face. I
I
could see
love
it on
that.
his face, and I said, I want to just tell your manager this. And at first, he got the "uh-oh, I'm in trouble" look. And then the interesting thing is, as I was leaving, he came up to me and he said, he goes, "I'm just floating. The rest of the day is going to be so great." And I felt so good about it was, it took me, what, 15 seconds? And this young man's day was better because of that. And
It costs.
it goes to your point of, we need to remember to do that.
And it's
To just
amazing
take that.
when you do that, Dan, because I love that example, and I'll tell you why. Because that's exactly where my self-discovery of attitude aerobics, and I didn't coin that
Uh-huh.
phrase or the concept that I referenced. I borrowed that from a guy by the name of Nick Murray, who authored a book I read about 35 years ago. But
Okay.
where I started was taking out a business card at lunch and just writing a handwritten note sincerely complimenting the server on the service I received. And when you do stuff like that, it to your point, it's amazing and almost kind of sad in its own way that something small like that can brighten so many people's day. But I'm glad you pointed out the part about how that made you feel, because that's the point of it at all. Is
Okay.
put those. It takes nothing, like you said. It cost nothing. It took you 15 seconds to do it. It was genuine. You made two people's day, and by doing that, you probably made your own day as well. And that's just, I think, the most underrated thing people can do in the world of resilience is exactly those types of things.
Yeah, and and my step was lighter when I left, and I didn't realize what it was going to do for me. It's not why I did it. I did it for the young man to pay forward, and to your point, it came back to me and created a positive energy in myself, and I really
Yeah.
like that. One thing I wanted to ask you is, one of the things I see. So in the work that I do, I'm reminding organizations, employers, companies, that they shouldn't be pushing out their experience, that they should find ways to connect the younger with the older because of that interplay. They can teach each other. That several studies have proven that intergenerational teams are much more productive. They're much more innovative because of those things. And also, if you've seen some of my other, podcasts, the knowledge, the folklore, the what that company is about walks out the door when you send those people away. Because, day to day, the way we get our work done is not what's written on paper. It's the shortcuts. It's the little things that we do in order to get the job done. And those things a lot of times aren't there. Um, One of the things that I'm curious about is how can we tell those people who are the head of those organizations? There's a big thing now that says if there's a gap in your resume, I'm not even looking at you. Okay? So you and I have had gaps because we've had some medical episodes, or you had to be a caregiver, or some reason you had to step away. I truly believe those people are more resilient than the people who are sitting there. And they
I
have
would
more
agree with that.
As I told people, I did a piece on long-term unemployment. And one of the things I tell people is there is nothing in your organization, no problem that's tougher than what that person just went through. You bring in gold in. And I'm just curious if you have some, ideas to tell somebody in an organization, places you consult with, and say, look, have you considered this person because of their resilience?
Yeah, and I don't know if I can articulate it a whole lot better than you just did there, Dan, but
That's
I think
okay.
it's really important. It all depends on what are you hiring for as an employer? Are you hiring for skills that maybe can be learned on the fly? Because a lot of times skill sets can be learned on the fly. But if you're looking, I mean, as a former business owner myself, I would have wanted to hire for character, because I can take somebody with a high character and turn them into the employee with the skills that I want and the employee that I'm looking for. Character is much, much harder to find, and it can tend to be insidious in nature there. I think you bring up a really solid point with the way you kind of brought this topic on, or this portion of this topic on. When you look at somebody who, it was the kiss of death back in our day to have a big gap in employment, and to some degree it still is. But if you look at what somebody went through in order to have that gap, the amount of character that comes along hand in hand with a very clearly defined and built resilience muscle, that's hard to find. And it's much easier to take somebody with high character, I think, in my experience, take that person with high character and turn them into a very good asset for the company with the skills you want, than to take somebody with maybe questionable character but high skills and turn them into the asset that you want there. That's just my opinion based on a lot of experience in the workplace and in business.
Yeah, I agree. Character is really important. I mean, when I've hired, I look for problem solvers. I figure skills can get taught, and skills are ephemeral. They change all the time, and especially, earlier in my career, I was in a very technical field, and there was language of the week. So and I
Yes.
think there's a lot of hiring now looking for that person who has a list of skills that you think they need. But to your point, the character, the resilience, the problem solving is really what matters in a lot of businesses. And especially I tend to talk more with small and medium-sized companies, where hiring mistakes are expensive. Very large companies can absorb those a little easier. But if you're, a smaller operation, when you make those mistakes and you get the wrong character, it can cost you a lot.
For
and
sure.
and all the energy that you then as the employer have to put into it, because I'm sure you hire people you to do the work and you can delegate it to them because you can trust them and they got good character. That takes that load off of you. You can build your business. If you're spending all your energy dealing with a wrong hire, um, that can be really quite difficult.
Very much so.
And we've all experienced where we thought we had the right one, and sometimes we make a mistake, but that goes back to your whole resilience argument of finding the way out of that, crawling out of that pit. I really like, that work that you do to help people see that positive, the paying forward. And I think it's quite poignant for today's world. Because a lot of it is we're dealing with this AI and everything else, and people who are very skilled people of high character who just can't get in and get a job. And some of what you teach, would probably really very much help those people, to maybe look at it a different way. Maybe they start something on their own. And I've had that myself, where I've been in those situations where I couldn't find work, where I aged out and became overqualified, and all those words that they use,
Oh yeah.
all those code words they use for age. And as a guy who refused to dye my hair, so uh, all that catches up with you. But it's interesting because once you get in there, they see your work, and that's really what matters day to day. I found that that kind of falls away. um yeah, so that's good. I So when you start with somebody, I'm kind of curious how you've mentioned a few things already, but a lot of times they're in this deep pit, and I know what that feels like because I've been in that pit.
And me too.
And and how do you help them kind of start crawling out of that pit, to look towards that rim and say, there's daylight up there, I'm going to get there?
Well, the first thing, other than what we talked about, with the attitude aerobics and the
Hmm.
getting through victimhood, and there really is a process to learn to get out of the victimhood. By the way, it's not just, hey, suck it up, Buttercup, kind of a talk, because those kinds
Right,
of
which doesn't work. Yeah.
they don't work. Motivational talks really don't have any shelf life.
Uh-huh.
It's a process of helping people recognize, because by the time I'm on the scene with anybody, there's almost zero likelihood. In fact, I've never seen anybody that was past the age of, say, like 10 years old that had not dealt with some kind of resilience, or I'm sorry, some kind of adversity, and needed
Sure.
resilience at some point in their life. So the first step is just to kind of take an inventory and look at some difficulties that,
Hmm.
and they may not be, look, when I'm talking to somebody, and they know anything about my background, it's like, well, I've never dealt with anything close to what Mark has dealt with. Well, it doesn't matter, because in fact, my situation wasn't a big deal in my head, because when I got diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, and this is key to this point here, it was far from the first time that I'd ever dealt with a life-threatening illness. So I had a little bit of a cheat code. I'd already seen this movie a few times before, and I think that's key. And that's what I'm saying is adversity is a very relative thing. So if somebody is deep in the soup, as I've referred to it, the first thing to do is to stop, take a big time out, and the process of understanding that whatever doesn't kill us really does make us stronger is look in the rearview mirror and look at the things in life that you may not think were a big thing, but they were a big thing to you at the time. And you ended up, not just getting through them, not just surviving them, but in most cases, almost everybody would say, well, I grew from them. So you're developing a little bit of a base there, and realizing that, oh, okay, this may actually teach me something. This may actually be something that helps me in the future. And recognizing that fact, it's a habit that has to be formed to keep that front and center. But that's really the starting point there. And then we bridge into what I refer to as the 3 Ps: push, process, improve. And that gets into a whole myriad of different things that people can do to develop the habit of getting out of their comfort zone and pushing themselves to become better at things. Recognize that, just like what we said, motivational talks, or the get up off the mat, rah types talk, they don't really do much good in the at least not in the long term. But understand everything is a process, and develop a process for how it is you want to get from where you are to where you want to be. And then develop the 3rd P is the prove. Develop really a database in your mind of proof that you can deal with difficult situations, whether we're talking about the very specific difficulty that you find yourself in currently, or just it's a skill set, just knowing that you're the type of person that has and can deal with difficulty.
Great. Well, thank you. I really like the fact that you talk about that it is their journey and they have to do the work. And I love that kind of coaching. And so I appreciate you coming on today, and great insights and wonderful work that you're doing out there.
Thank you, Dan.
So I want to thank you, Mark, for being part of Bridging of Ages today. We could talk for hours on this easily.
We could. Thank you, Dan. I appreciate you having me.
And we're gonna go and have a word from our sponsor. When we come back, we'll wrap up, and thank you for being on today.
Thank you, Dan.
Welcome back to Bridging of Ages. If you're just joining us, my name is Dan Mendelevitz. I want to thank Mark Light for a wonderful talk and a chance to understand what he's doing for people out there. I just wanted to go over a few action items that you can use to help you understand and look for resilience. So action item number 1. Who has come back from adversity? So do you have people on your team or people you're considering bringing onto your team that have gone through adversity? And it's kind of hard, if you think about it, to find somebody who hasn't. I think they'd be a great addition to your team, because think about what they went through is going to make them much more resilient for working through the problems that you have in your business or organization. Action item 2. Resilience is an asset to your team. So think about that resilience that people have that they can bring to your team, whether they're younger, older, whatever they've gone through, and the way they can work together. That resilience creates a confidence and a mental toughness, and those things are an asset to your organization or company. Always an asset to your team. Action item 3. Look at employment gaps as resilience builders. Often we tell people that if you have a gap in your resume, we're not even going to consider you. I suggest to you that the opposite is true, because anything that they have gone through, those kind of difficulties, why they had to step away for a little bit, whether it was being a caregiver or because of an illness or raising children or grandchildren, it's really important to understand that they had to build up incredible resilience and problem solving that you can use in your business. Because I truly believe that anything that comes up in your business organization can't be harder than what this person just went through. And that creates resilience. So the tip for today is resilience is as important as skills. So remember what Mark talked about, how important character is. And resilience is part of character. Those are the people that you want to help you reach what you're going to be doing day to day, month to month, year to year in your business and organization. So once again, action item 1, who has come back from adversity? Action item 2, resilience is an asset to your team. Action item 3, look at employment gaps as resilience builders. And of course, our tip for today, resilience is as important as skills. This has been another episode of Bridging of Ages. My name is Dan Mendelevitz. I want to thank my guest, Mark Light. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Invest in brain power, fuel brilliance.